Greetings, Marsh, and welcome to episode 40 of my Pyanodon's playthrough. In this packed episode, we start making cDNA, as well as start processing Biocrud, and build a big slaughtering bus for our creatures. Enjoy! Let's do the Plasmids first, and this is a little different than what we've done before, in that we need to do Zogna bacteria, and we can make it from petri dishes and wood. However, one recipe that makes Zogna bacteria is reprocessing our Biocrud, and I think we're at the point now where we should do that. I was kind of putting it off because we couldn't use the Zogna bacteria, but now that we can, sure. It's a relatively simple process. It just makes a bunch of random stuff, but luckily this random stuff is largely used in this area, so it would make sense to do it there. But for now, let's set up Plasmids, and then we can add in the Biocrud reprocessing. And as always, we need to consider decay, but luckily this process only has decay with the incubated petri dishes. And the great thing about the petri dishes is we don't really care about waste. We can just let it run and take that off our list. I grabbed the 15K tank because we do want to have some logic attached to this. Fortunately, we're not really going to see the valve in here, so knowing that, we should probably space it off to the side. But we want an underflow in here just to get it up to 10%. And we're going to need lamps, and this depot is right here. It's only got wood in it, but we can do a mixed depot here. Since these two systems aren't linked with each other, the number can be whatever we want it to be, so we can fill that space up with lamps instead. We don't want to do a calculator caravan for this depot specifically, even though we need a fixed number of lights and wood. This depot is also servicing this other side, and they may run at different rates. So because of that, we're going to just use a mixed outpost that have two separate caravans delivering to it. So in goes the wood. This thing is so patchwork compared to the other builds, but since the numbers are so small, this will be fine. And then we have an outpost here delivering very small numbers of resources, and we don't really need to use the spreadsheet because it's going to be equal numbers of glassware and laboratory equipment. Well, the lamps are here, so in it goes, making the Zogna bacteria. And I guess that is an achievement. It makes it very slowly, 5 seconds to make 20 of them. So it's going to take quite some time to fill up this tank, but it's only going to go to 10%. While we're waiting for the caravan to return, we can kind of take a look at what this Biocrud processing is going to look like. So big it extends over here. But basically a little bit of Biocrud goes in, and a lot of biomass, and a little bit of steam, a little bit of phytoplankton. And then we're going to get a bunch of stuff. The liquid is going to be the Zogna bacteria. So that's kind of the limiting factor of all of this, and also why it should be done right here, because this is where we need the Zogna. And then our other concerns depend on if there is decay or not. If there's no decay, well, we can deal with it however we want to and send it along a belt. But when it does have decay, suddenly that belting isn't really practical. So what we're going to do is look at what is the most convenient thing to turn this decay item into so it doesn't decay anymore. So if we get cellulose, we can turn that into the substrate, which is also already done here, which means it can just go into whatever storage chest handles that, and it won't decay along the way. If we make any agar, we could turn that into a petri dish, which is also made around here, and that won't decay anymore once it's in petri dish form. And the last thing that decays is this seed extract, which we're going to get a very small amount of, and currently we can't do anything with it. So the best thing we can do is send it through a composter and turn it into biomass. It's slightly better to do it that way than to let it go back into Biocrud. And the last thing we'll have is flora, but because that decays so slowly, we can just send that back along the factory, and it will probably actually go to where it needs to without going bad. But it looks like it's filling up pretty well, and there's all of our laboratory equipment that made it, and now it just needs the bacteria. And there it goes, making plasmids. And of course that's an achievement. So we're going to want to check to make sure that this fills up to our limit of 100, and when it does, all of this will shut down. Also, this is another spreadsheet item. Let's switch it to output so you can figure out the exact input, and it's 1 per second of tin and 8 per second of biomass. So biomass is 8, tin is 1, and of the 3 options, the rounding is best, or 26 stacks of biomass and 4 of tin. Now our factory very well may not be able to supply the resources to keep this going, but the speed it needs to work at depends entirely on how much Biocrud we have. so I doubt it's actually going to run at full speed very often. And the limiting item is the biomass, so off it goes. Looks like we filled up on our plasmids, which correctly shut down all of these machines. We want to hook this up to the Zognobacteria and just let it run as much as it can. So something we need to do is make sure that the Biocrud actually gets here, because it's being made all over the place. Well, we kind of need to do a search for Biocrud and just find all of the chests that have it. And when we find them, put everything on the belt. Now we need to take all of the output and throw it into this deposit. And before we continue, we want to make sure that we're processing the things that can spoil. And we can do direct insertion for this. And both of the items that are going in here could themselves spoil. So if so, there'll be a reverse direction inserter, putting it back into the depot. And then we could put it back into the Biocrud reprocessing machine. It's kind of a lot that we want to hook up and make sure that it's all working first, because it would be very satisfying to see this all go correctly the first time. So that machine is waiting for the agar, which is good. And yeah, I think all of that is finally set up, which means there's enough hooked up for us to actually see this work. So here we go. There's going to be so much junk. And yeah, from here we just got to look at all of the things that are left in the deposit and where can we use it. We could potentially have a caravan just sitting here picking everything up, but the numbers are so small that may be an issue. There's some freebies in here, like the basic substrate can just go along with everything else. This is probably just going to have to be one big combined junk belt that just takes this stuff all over the place to where it's needed. Instead of looking at what should we send around, we should just look at the few things that we shouldn't. So looking at all this stuff, it all essentially either has a use or it can be decomposed. Well, as far as the things that get decomposed, because this process requires the biomass to even begin with, we probably can just decompose those items right here and save the logistics. Things with no use would be the substrate, the seeds, and the maggots. Hopefully this one machine can process it all fast enough. Well, we got rid of all of the stuff made in small quantities. Now what remains is all of the big stuff. Yeah, we definitely aren't making biomass fast enough. So let's just modify this to not be a combined caravan anymore. Meanwhile, we have our beautiful belt of junk, which we need to send all over the factory. First thing we need to pull off are the mushroom spores. They're pretty low value, but nonetheless, it would be nice to make use of them. Okay, all the junk made it here, so it gets sorted. And there's our little bits of spores making it through. Then when we make it to here, we're going to have a whole bunch of carbon black. So there it is. This is the biggest output of the build at 1.5 a second, so it's a lot of carbon black. It's definitely worth saving. And this is going to save us a ton of anthracene oil. And here it comes. The reason why I'm not putting this on caravans is because the amounts we get is very random, but also the flora is on a timer. So I would rather us move it on a belt and get it used up rather than it potentially just going bad waiting for the caravan to get full. Caravans really aren't good for decay items unless you have it set to where they wait for a limited amount of time and then they just go. We do have a caravan like that. It's the one that's picking up meat for our Digosauruses, and it's basically waiting an hour and then making a run with the meat just to make sure that it doesn't go bad. But yeah, that's running, using up the carbon black. Looks good. And when it gets here, we actually already have a bit of a return belt for flora. So in it goes. The moss goes to the right, and then the flora and any of the spoiled flora will go down. And then it has a huge, huge path of going all the way down here, all the way around, and then eventually back up where the spoiled flora and whatnot is already being sent. So we just need, yet again, one more splitter in here, looking for the regular flora. And I believe if we do all of this, it should get sorted correctly. And the moss made it. That'll definitely help use up a little bit less stone. But of course, this shut down again because no biomass. So the question is, how do we want to make the biomass? Probably from logs. We would need 8. Most importantly, that's most of a compost plant, but it seems to be running pretty good. Let's make sure all of the items are getting to where they need to. The spores are there. All of the carbon black is right there. The flora is being correctly split apart, and the moss is going to where it needs to. And looking at flora, It did make it to where it needs to, but there's no buffer, and that might be a problem. So there we go. Looking good. At least there's seemingly no biocrud anywhere it's not supposed to be. Really, the only things left with biocrud are these, and that's just our long-term collection that we've been making. It's a very satisfying but crazy build, all of this junk. I think this is much better than just composting the biocrud, because there's a lot of useful stuff you get out of it. Now we need to make the retrovirus, and yeah, I guess we'll just throw this on the end, because why not? This is a single building, so we can insert most of these items. Let's use the calculator, even though the numbers are pretty easy. The things that would come in: glassware, lab instruments, cocoons, steel, and that's it. 0.2, 0.2, 0.8, 0.2, but it errored out, so let's pick one to adjust. I wonder if we took one off of these three and added 2 there, would that work? Yeah, sure, we'll do that. 33 minutes is a long time for it to go, and we can pick any of these items to limit it on. Okay, he dropped everything off, so in goes the hot air, and in goes all of those items. Now the last thing that we need are yet again more petri dishes, which is why all these builds are together, because that would have been so annoying to make all of those petri dishes. And there it goes. It's very fast, and there's the retrovirus. Okay then, we're basically at the end here, where we need to combine everything we've been working on. So the moss gene samples and the bio samples. Also, we've got our plasmids, which come all the way down here and combine with the retroviruses, and also the substrate. And also this building is going to need 10 of these mines. This whole build ended up being a lot bigger than I was expecting. It seems like that's a common occurrence. Also, just looking at the plan didn't quite prepare us for all of this decay we'd have to deal with. We consolidated it, so hopefully anytime in the future we need this stuff, we can just ask this build to do it. And because these numbers are so tiny, we can just output directly into this chest, and that can also be the control signal that all of these run on. It is quite satisfying to see all of this alien life stuff going, and all of the decay and everything handled and accounted for. Especially the biocrud. I don't know, there's something very satisfying about this biocrud and all of the junk that it makes. Okay, most items are here, and it's time for the final caravan. But the numbers are so tiny here that we might want to limit it. So the 2 things we need are glassware and lab equipment. Glassware is 0.31, lab equipment is 0.1, and yeah, that's what I figured. We would basically get 2 hours of time out of that, and that is way too much. In fact, even cutting it in half still is way too much time. So I kind of wanted to get it down to 1/3 of the capacity of the caravan. So by typing 10 in here, it will do that for us. And the rounding solution is the best one. We're definitely starting to feel short on rubber now, but that makes sense. We are just about at the point to where we can expand latex production because we'll have enough Mark II rocks in order to do that. And how are the Mark II rocks? Moving along, we've got a nice healthy selection of them now. We are halfway upgraded, so it's going pretty fast. Okay, the delivery's here. Let's hook it up, and that should be everything we need for the cDNA. Finally. It's a pretty complicated thing to make, mainly because of all of these interconnected processes and spoilage, but now that we've made it, we won't have to worry about it anymore. With the added benefit of having a reasonably high output, it isn't something we should find ourselves short on. So we'll have to let this run for a little bit and make sure it shuts off when it gets to 100, but I'm sure that it will. Rock Mark IIs are looking pretty good. We basically just need about another 50 of them to fill out our build. So this is a good time to think about how we want to process them. And we're definitely going to need to replace this slaughterhouse with many more on a centralized critter slaughtering location. And where would we want to do this? Well, ideally somewhere that could extend out in a bus-like format, similar to how we've done several times up until now. And ideally it would be somewhere around here because this is where we are currently making critters. And we want to try to avoid cliffs. Like it's getting more and more difficult. We might just have to go over a mine or 5. But anyway, we need to figure out how many critters we want to potentially be able to slaughter. Our build, technically, could create 0.88 of them. Do we want to slaughter that many? Probably. We don't need to slaughter that many, but we have the capacity to grow them, so we might as well build the capacity to slaughter them. Really, it's only going to be 9 slaughterhouses, so it's not like this is a giant setup. And it will create 176 formic acid, and something entirely separate to this is we're going to need a new and expanded latex setup. This is what we have now, and it is obviously way too small. So what would a setup look like that could consume 176 formic acid? It would look something like this. The 1-to-1 ratio of various buildings is still mostly true. Like we have 1-to-1 here, and basically 1-to-2 going this direction, and potentially 2-to-1 going there. So we'll have to see, but we mainly want to look at the numbers, and the relevant thing here is the stone. And compared to our factory's ability to output stone, that's moderate. We certainly could supply it. Right now, we can put out 2 belts of stone because our stone buffer has 2 output belts. We could potentially consume 30, 8.1 isn't that bad. So this is a kind of thing that potentially could be rather slow, and I think that it is best served by a time skip. So when I did the main bus, having the time skip was kind of a way to test what people thought of the time skips, and it seemed like people took it pretty well. So I kind of want to continue with that, because I kind of see the factory, as it gets bigger and more complicated, has more and more time skips. But specifically, I think the thing that makes it worthy of a time skip is we're just doing something we've already done. Like, it's just going to be this same build, but bigger, and doing this, but bigger. So I don't need to spend an episode showing that. We can just skip forward to seeing the final result. So I will see you in a second. Okay, I'm back. That took about 4 hours or so I'm glad there was a time skip in there so I didn't have to edit it for like 5 minutes or less of footage. But let's go through everything here. I haven't actually tested most of it, so we'll find out together if it works. The first thing is that we need a bunch of cages, and they are actually kind of slow to craft. 4 seconds plus all of the intermediates, of course. So I built a machine here. It's kind of out of the way, but it's because we don't have solder or titanium on the bus yet, so it's just easier to do this. And let's grab 200 cages for now. I'm not sure how many we'll need, but we'll be able to run a test. But nonetheless, you can see how the machine works here. It just makes iron sticks and throws them into this machine, and it makes cages. It's not super slow, but it really is if you try to handcraft them. One other element of the factory that got upgraded, I rebuilt the coal mine here to try to just absolutely maximize what we can get out of it. So the ideal positions of the miners changed a little bit as the patch went down, and I still couldn't get all of the belt lines we needed. So one of the 2 belts that goes into each of these tar processors is being pulled away with priority to go to the power plant. But besides that, here we go. This whole thing is the build. I put it up a little higher than initially planned. There is an iron ore here that could get covered up, but otherwise there wouldn't really be that much. And then this nickel isn't really an issue. And that just seems better to put it up here rather than all the way down here, and it's just that much further away from the factory. And a lot of this has been built into the terrain, so there are cliffs right here and here and here. I tried to get it in there as carefully as possible. But let's go through it step by step and start firing everything up. I adjusted the numbers a little bit. It was somewhere around 1.76 and I dropped it to 1.25. We technically only need 1 per second. And the reason why I dropped it is just to make the belts easier, because that made the largest item 7.5, which took a lot of belts out of the build and just let things be on half belts, and it just ended up being cleaner. And since we didn't actually need any more than 1 latex right now, I figured let's do the clean build. We caught up on Vrox, so everything is maxed out now. And because it would spoil, I guess we can just pick these items up here. If we just kept the floor in here and it was never used for anything, it would kind of be a waste. So I put logic in here based on the number of Mark II Vrox and just stopped the flora. Some of it will decay in that slot right there, but it'll work all the same, so it doesn't really matter. So the output of both fish and Vrox are put on this belt here. I'll move that out of the way for now since we're talking about the slaughtering. We could have moved it by a caravan, but I think it kind of looks cooler just to see it by belt. Plus, it's kind of a very dense item to move by caravan. Even though we don't really use enough of them to make a belt worth it, I think it just kind of looks cooler. And out here, there isn't really any logistics anyway, so it's pretty easy to move them out here by belt because it's not like they're blocking anything. When the fish and rocks get here, they get split off into their appropriate machines. I decided on limiting our output of rock parts based on caging them. So in other words, the belt will nominally be empty, but when we want some, they will start caging them, they will start going down the belt, and then going to where they need to. And if we follow this green wire all the way down, it is essentially connected to, there we go, pretty much everything in this system, which includes this 15K pi tank, and that will be the limit for this. And the limit is set to 50%. And one thing I'm not sure about is how many of the cages do we actually need? So we can create a little logic condition here that if there are less than 10 cages, this inserter will put some in for us. And there we go, because I'm not sure how many this is going to take when it's in full operation. So nominally this belt will not be full, that the caged rocks will go down, 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 and then the cages will be taken away and sent back up. So really, we only need to have enough cages for this to flow properly. And then the output will just be placed on this belt and then sent where it needs to. We definitely want to keep the animal parts flowing because if they're sitting in the belt or in the machine, they're going to decay. So we want them to move along. Let's test this out. So we'll connect them into the caging machine. There it goes. All of the rock parts and also the cages, just a bunch of everything is being stuck on that belt, and we are very, very quickly building up on formic acid. And we'll connect this to keep it going, that it will keep going down, down, down until it gets to the bottom here when it starts being sorted into the system. The reason why there's all this empty space here is because we don't know if we're going to want to expand our slaughtering in the future for rocks. So all of this space here is dedicated to that. And this will apply to essentially every build, that we're just adding in empty space because who knows what we'd want to use it for. So we might as well leave it empty. We're out here in the wilderness of the factory, so space isn't particularly expensive. But I do want to see if this stops properly, and actually it looks like it did. That we very quickly got our formic acid, and I'm curious what it's actually going to stop at, because we don't really want it to go to 100. I mean, it can, it's not like there's a problem. The formic acid doesn't go bad, but I am curious. So because it maxed out, I'm wondering if this should be all the way to 10% then. Because it looks a little better if the tank is not completely full. Because if it's completely full, we might think there's some kind of problem with the logic when there really isn't. That said, it barely went over 100, but whatever. And in the end, we needed to put in that many cages. Okay, there's all of our rock parts, but I kind of want to stress test the system. So we're going to go over here to our fish. We really don't need to process that many, but then again, in the future we might. So what I did here is put them on only one side, and this other side could be for some other creature that we just don't need to process that many of. They both will go on this input belt, and the appropriate machine will pull them off. Now with fish, we don't have to cage them because they're fish, so they can just go straight in, but I wanted to have the same kind of logic controls as rocks and potentially any other creature. So I stopped the belt here at 50%. And let's drop this one down to 10% like the other one. Because the tank is empty, the fish want to come in. So we'll do that and it will very quickly fill up the belt. There's actually going to be a pretty big buffer in here, so 10% sounds pretty good. And there they go, making all the fish parts. And they'll come down here and get stopped as well. And I used the 10K pi tank because I had it available. So the next step here is sorting all of the animal parts. We could just do one big mixed belt, but it would be kind of awkward. It's a lot less work to sort them ahead of time. So we don't need to have this kind of output of animal parts. They're just sorted between what animal parts they are. Later, when we have loaders, we can just have everything on one or however many belts we need and it'll be fine. So probably the easiest way to do this is to insert things into the top and then just sort them down the stack. This absolutely can have throughput issues, but I don't really care about that. Right now, I just want it to be relatively easy. And if there are issues, we can deal with it later. For example, pre-sorting it up here and then sending them to the appropriate belt. It was just a lot of work to do that, and I figured it would be a lot more straightforward to do this. And it's a little complicated because you see right here where there's no filter. Well, that's because the only thing that's left is skin, so this is the skin belt. Just like there's nothing on here, but that's the brain belt. It's kind of difficult to understand what goes where, so it'll be easier just to run it and see. And this last belt seems like it's not doing anything, but that belt is for the jerky. And I guess it's possible we could get some jerky on the belts or in these machines, but I really don't think that'll be the case. So I'm going to live dangerously and not account for jerky on this belt system. It should be fine, really. Even if jerky is made, it'll just get pushed to this belt here, or this belt here, or whatever. But let's hook everything up and see it work, that it all goes through the different sorting. Like fish don't make the chitin, so it doesn't do anything, but we get an effect like this. And now for the ruck parts, which is a lot higher volume. I didn't actually test this before, so it's nice to see it operate, and it's actually pretty awesome looking at all these items here. But yeah, seems to work to me. And this is only a backup, and it doesn't need to run anywhere near that fast normally. And everything starts piling up. And you can see how if there's a backup of something like guts, it is actually carrying over and all the way up here, blocking the meat. And whatever, that's fine. This is just a test. So the warehouses are slightly staggered by one square here, and each one is meant to hold a different resource. And I use the deposits because we can get 2 belts of input and 2 belts of output, and I space them so we could get 2 caravan depots on each side and also have space for 2 rows of inserters if we needed it. That will allow us to have an input and an output of animal parts in addition to whatever else logic exists here. After they're sorted in each deposit, the items are just handled however they normally are. So meat is used as food for the Digosauruses, so it goes into a caravan outpost for that purpose, but also has this backup here in case anything goes bad and turns into jerky. It is removed from the depot and put on the jerky belt, which is currently empty. So if we hook everything up, we can see it operate. And that actually needs to be open. So of course it's going to prioritize putting things in the outpost. And then the next one here is chitin. So we'll just hook everything up and let it go down. The chitin we don't have a use for, so it is immediately turned into biomass. And these inserters here are forcing it to hold on to at least 100. And the only reason I'm doing that is so there's an icon on the warehouse and we can see what it is supposed to have. Also, you'll notice that I have filters on these inserters when they're not really necessary. I mean, they kind of are here. You don't want the caravans picking up the wrong things, but like for the chitin here, it doesn't go bad, so we don't need to have filters here. But I put them there anyway for consistency and for just in case. Like what happens if somehow jerky gets in here? Well, at least it won't leave the warehouse. And these are so big that it can go on for quite some time putting things in the wrong place before it'll clog up. So that's my logic there. And the next thing is guts. Currently, we don't have a use for it. And technically, it is better to let it turn into jerky first because it can be either A, food, or B, turned into biomass, and we get way more biomass if we let it become jerky first. And the same applies to brains. We could use it as caravan food, but it's not really necessary, so we are doing the same thing as guts and letting it turn into jerky first. And with the bones, we currently don't have a use for it. It doesn't go bad into jerky, but nonetheless, we'll hold on to 100 first and then just send it to get turned into biomass. And then we have skin, same story as the bones. And finally, there's nothing in the jerky warehouse, but there it is. And everything is running as it should. And there's all our signals. We definitely will need to move things around, but for now, I would like to remove some of our extra jerky, of which we have 29,000 of. This thing has been a messy thorn in our side for quite some time, so it's nice to finally get rid of it. And that's one less burner assembler in the factory. I do want to add a decayed first priority to every inserter. Again, it doesn't need to be on the jerky, but for consistency, let's just do it to everything. This means that any animal part that is requested, we will try to use up the decaying items first just to keep the average freshness as high as we can. Ever since we started making those laboratory instruments, our factory has been short on rubber. It'll be great to have a 5 times increase to our output here. And now that we have filled this up past 10,000, it is now ejecting the jerky out to get turned into biomass because we have an excessive amount. Okay, let's follow it down the chain. These 3 belts here are simply the biomass junk belt, so anything we don't need will go on those 3 to be turned into biomass. And I just chose 3 because we had this 4:3 balancer that has been working pretty well, and it's relatively compact. It's really hard to guess how many belts of items you're going to be able to turn into biomass because each item turns into different amounts, and it expands greatly when you turn it into biomass. Like jerky, for example, is a 1:8 ratio, so it's kind of tricky. But I also left a huge amount of space here, so when we have more belts going all over the place, there will be room to do a bus here. The reason this does a U like this is because the items need to get to the end, to get to the beginning of the sorting, to go into the warehouses. So they come from out here, and then U and go back. And then kind of the same thing happens really, where they come out here and then down just to make sure we have access to everything. So anything on these belts is going to be here because we already have too much of these particular items. So they're going to be distributed, and it's pretty neat, especially the bones. But the jerky is going to be going on for a long time because we have a ton of it. And of course, the chitin too. And then when it gets to the end, it goes into the compost stack here. I just chose to have 12 buildings on each side. It's really hard to know, but you end up needing way more plants than you think. Also, remembering that it expands, this center belt is the input and the side belts are the biomass output. So there's no way that it's going to go from 1 belt in the middle to 2 on the outside. Even the bad items are a 1:3 ratio. This is a very messy process, but each machine has 2 inserters, and it inserts on both the nearest belt and the furthest belt, and the center belt is for the inputs. And then when it gets to the end, the biomass continues. So now that the items are here, let's hook them up. And each machine is just going to pick up whatever it can. It will prioritize what it's already working on, but if the machine becomes empty, it'll pick up something else instead and process that. And there's more room here if we need it. We can definitely do more of these stacks if we need them, or we can make them longer if we need them. So we have some options. It is working furiously, making tons and tons of biomass. So when it gets to the end here, first of all, it gets pulled out and put into this outpost because this will be our factory's new source of biomass, and we'll be producing so much of it that we essentially don't need to worry about making biomass on site pretty much anywhere. And if it doesn't need to go in that outpost, it's just going to go to these boilers. And interestingly enough, you need about 6.5 inserters to fire a boiler only on the biomass. So we'll hook up the water and hook up the steam, and this will just be byproduct steam to be sent around the factory. And that thing is filling up very rapidly. And for now, the boilers are only working at half speed because the other half of it is going into here. And wow, that's so fast. That is a lot of biomass. Like I said, we don't need to worry about making biomass on site anymore. All of it can come from here. And of course, very quickly, it's all turning into jerky because that's what we have a lot of. And that shows you how fast it is that it chewed through all of those items that we made to fill up the tanks. And now all of this is just backup that the factory has had for a long time. Now that I think about it, it does look like we need to have a second one in here because that is only half of a belt worth of output. There we go. It looks so crazy, but biomass is disappearing. And looking at the actual deposit, you know, we're going through it reasonably fast. Not too bad. So now we need to make the latex. The formic acid gets sent over here. It's a pretty complicated system here, but I tried to create a repeatable pattern. So we have slightly too many washers, but everything else is pretty well sized. Let's see how it works. And there it goes. We've made limestone before, so nothing crazy about this. It just goes to the bottom, and we'll insert it on one side of the belt because that's all we need, and it will go in there. The other side of this belt comes from all of these sap extractors, and all they need is power. So there they are. It is a pretty slow craft. So while they're going, let's go to seaweed here, which just needs its water, and off they go. Also, a pretty slow craft. And we have our stone input, which comes in and takes up half of the belt. And there's the seaweed, which comes in and takes up the other half. And there's all of our sap taking its half of the belt. And here it is. So yeah, that's kind of why I decided on these numbers, because we just got these clean 2 belts here and got the maximum output out of it without doing anything crazy. So limestone and sap goes down the chain to make creamy latex on the left, and the limestone is also used for the sodium alginate on the right. And then in goes the stone and the seaweed, and there goes sodium alginate, which then makes the latex slab, and it goes into the 2 high pressure furnaces to make latex. And there they go, our 1.25 latex a second. It makes it to the end, and it goes into the caravan outpost. And that's the end of this episode. On the next one, we use our cDNA to build a semi-permanent setup that can produce the various new organisms that we need. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.